be there. And again, I took that on board. So the other night, she was in the bathroom getting ready. I went to the bedroom, turned the lights off, lit some candles, hid under the bed. And when she came in, I just grabbed her ankles. And apparently that wasn't the surprise she had in mind. But she did surprise me before Christmas last year. She said, "You have remembered to pick me up from my work stool." Now that came as a complete shock, because she's self-employed and works from home. So no, that's fine, I can do that. So I got to the place at the right time, she gets in the car, and all I said was, "Have you had a nice time?" And then it started. "Are you saying I'm drunk?" "Oh, no, but clearly you've had one or two." And then we had silence for about 3 minutes. And then I got the classic, because the thing is, I don't think you love me. In fact, I don't think you've ever really loved me. So, well, I do, I have. Obviously, there's no guarantees going forward. So, well, if you love me, you can prove it right now. I said, "Well, how am I going to do that?" She said, "You can get on top of me in this car and make love to me." No, that's not going to happen. She said, "Give me one good reason." I said, "I'll do better than that, I'll give you 3. She said, "Go on then." I said, "Well, number 1, it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Number 2, we're still outside Wetherspoons in the middle of Gloucester. And number 3, last but by no means least, we've got your girlfriend Chris in the back of the car because we're giving her a lift home." And that's the thing, she's got a girlfriend. She went away on that cruise for a week with her girlfriend. That was fine. I didn't say a word. I wanted one night away with my girlfriend to spend that £500 cash prize. The shit I got from that. But we did have a conversation earlier in the year, round about January. She said, "I know you're getting older, and I think you need to calm down a little bit. And now you're retired, and there's probably not many more years ahead. You've got to look after your health and your stress, so you do need to calm down. But I don't mind sharing with you, Didmarton. I've got issues. Well, I say issues, let's call them by their proper name, shall we? Children. 29, 42 and 43. You think by now I know their names, but... to be fair, they all get treated exactly the same. So I don't know if you've got siblings, but all my kids get treated exactly the same, with utter contempt. And they rounded on me a few weeks back. I've been watching something on TV, a David Attenborough documentary about the melting of the polar ice caps. And we were just chatting about it, and I said, of course, the people that are most going to be affected are the Eskimos. "Oh, you can't say that word." "What? Eskimo, you can't say that. That is so racist, that is so discriminatory." I said, "Look, it's just a word I've grown up. I don't mean anything by it." They said, "You cannot say that word." But you wouldn't understand that, would you? Because you haven't been discriminated against. I said, "Right, hang on. Let me tell you this. I applied for a gig last week in Bristol. It said acts wanted, particularly those of LGBT or POC persuasion. And I phoned up, I said, "I'm interested in the gig." And they said, "Are you LGBT?" I said, "No." They said, "Are you POC?" I said, "I've got to be honest, I didn't really know what that meant." They said, "A person of colour." I said, "Yes, I am." They said, "What colour are you?" I said, "Ginger," and they put the phone down. So that's... I did suffer, I've got to be honest, as a kid, I suffered the name calling probably more than anything. Proper knob, ginger nut, Duracell, you little ginger wanker. And I can remember saying, "Dad, just..." I was thinking of my dad the other day, and the older people will get this. I was watching something on YouTube, World of Sport, back in the 60s, when we used to have wrestling on about 4 o'clock, and afterwards, me and Dad, I'd been about 6 or 7 at the time, we always used to have a pretend wrestle, and I'd try and pin his shoulders down for the count of 3, like they did on the TV. And at the last minute, he'd always just pop one of his shoulders up, and looking back, I think he was just trying to teach me a life lesson, and that being, no matter how hard something is, if you persevere enough, you will achieve your goal. And he always said to me, when you achieve your goal, you'll feel brilliant. And he was right. So I can remember the day I finally managed to pin his shoulders to the count of 3. It was absolutely brilliant. It was one of the best days of my life. To be fair, by then he was 94. In a care home, suffering with brittle bone disease. But I thought, sod it, a win's a win, isn't it, you know? It wasn't just my father. I can remember January 1964, 65. I was about 5 or 6. Just been back to school after the Christmas holiday, and I came home and Mum was in the kitchen. And I said, Mum, can I ask you a question? She said, what is it? I said, well, all the other little boys in my class were talking about the presents they had Christmas Day. She went, and? I said, well, I didn't get any presents, did I? She said, no, you didn't, and there's a very good reason for that. I said, was it because I was naughty before Christmas? She said, no. I said, what was it? She looked me straight in the eye. Well, I was 5. Looked me straight in the eye and said, Santa don't stop for ginger kids. That's harsh, isn't it? To be fair, my 3 girls have all been ginger. Saved me a fortune. It's been absolutely brilliant. But I've only got a couple of seconds. I retired 2 years ago, and it's been brilliant. I absolutely love being retired, I've got to be honest. But it does mean I've been spending 24/7 with my wife, and we've just got to a stage, like it's an irritating stage, I would call it. It's nothing major. Breathing. And if we're out in the car and we come up to a T-junction and I want to turn right, I'll say to her, is it all right to go? She'll go, yeah. And as I'm pulling out, as long as you're quick. I wasn't sure what retirement was going to look like. And again, you've got all this to look forward to, so... I didn't realise that it's obligatory, apparently, when you retire, to spend at least 4 days out of the 7 at your local garden centre. I had no idea that was a thing. Like, we go to Highfields down at Whitminster, and we're there so much, I've got a loyalty card. And we went there last August on my birthday, because that's how rock and roll my life is now. Just for coffee and cake. God, I mean, that's... yeah. So I gave my card over and she put it in, she said, oh, congratulations, it's your birthday, isn't it? I said, how do you know that? She said, well, it's come up on the till. She said, that's great, isn't it? I said, what's great about it? Well, it's your birthday. I said, listen, I said, I'm now 66. I said, the average life expectancy of a male in the UK is 81. If they're not obese. I said, so at best I've got 15 years. So you tell me what's good about today. And she said, well, now you qualify for one of our senior citizens discount cards. And I'm thinking, just fucking shoot me now. That's just... I said, well, I've got to pay for it. She said, no, they're free. So I've taken this card off her. I said, and what benefit is this to me? She said, well, you get 40% off a roast lunch on a Monday. Oh, okay. So I walk back and I sit down and Lynn's like, what have you got there? I said, it's senior citizen discount card. She said, what are the benefits? I said, well, apparently you get 40% off a roast lunch on a Monday. She said, give me that card and let me have a look at it. And she's looking at it, the small print, and she said, yeah, you are right. You do get 40% off a roast lunch on a Monday, served between 9:30 and 11:15. And I thought, who the hell eats a roast lunch on a Monday between the hours of 9:30 and 11:15? Well, let me tell you, Didmarton, since last August, every Monday... I'll just finish with this. One of the things I've really, I don't know, I've not really liked getting older, but you know, it happens, isn't it? And you've just got to face up to it. And I don't know about you older people in the room, but like death's on my mind quite a lot lately. And I used to really worry about it. And then I had a conversation with one of the girls at work I used to work with. And I said, I'm really worried about death. She said, all right, well, here's something that'll put your mind at rest. What is it? She said, you remember that time when you were in the womb? I went, no, of course I don't. She said, well, it'll be like that. I thought, that's brilliant, isn't it? That's absolutely... But I was all right at 50, because when you get to 50, through the post, free life assurance, don't have to qualify, I could deal with that. That changes when you get to 60. Funeral plans, that's what I was swamped with. I knew a little bit about funeral plans, because when my mum died in 2019, she had a funeral plan with the co-op. And as the last surviving son, I had to go in and sort it out. And I went into the co-op in Barton Street in Gloucester. I said, oh, hi, I'm Nick Hill, I'm Jean Hill's son. Come to talk about a funeral. She said, oh, right, yeah, have a seat, Nick. She said, before we start, how old are you? I said, well, I'm 63. What's that got to do with it? Oh, have you got a funeral plan? I went, no. Well, you should, because you could go at any time. I thought, oh, thanks for that. She said, do you know what it entails? I said, well, vaguely, but go on, tell me. She said, well, look, if you pay us £4,000 now, you can plan everything. So you can choose to be buried or cremated. You could have a band, you could have a disco, you could have a comedian, a magician. You could put some money over the bar. You could get people to wear fancy dress. Whatever you want, you can have. You can plan the whole day. We'll take care of it all. And, you know, whatever you want, you just give us £4,000 now. We had a conversation for 10 minutes. And I've got to be honest, at the end of it, I was actually looking forward to my own death. That's how... And on that joyous note, I'm sure there's some people closer to death in here tonight than I am. I will bid you good night, but thank you very much for listening. My name's Nick Hill.